Now that you are comfortable creating a flexbox and setting its direction, as well as wrapping its content, you are ready to learn how to align items inside your flexbox. When it comes to alignments, there are two types of alignments inside a flexbox. You can either align items or flex items inside a row or column, or you can align a row or a column inside the whole flexbox. And it's very important to understand the difference between those two. So to start, we're going to align flex items inside a row or column. All right, so let's do this inside a row. So we're going to go back to the row direction. So in this scenario, aligning items inside a row means that we're going to be aligning them horizontally. If you move to a column, then you're going to be aligning your items inside the column vertically. So let's use the justify content property to align our items inside their row. So let's set that to center to start, and you can see that we have just centered our items horizontally inside their row. If you reduce the width of the container or the flexbox, you can see that they're always going to be aligned inside their corresponding lines like that centrally. So they are pushed to the center of the row all the time. All right. Another important thing to note here, the size of your flex items is going to be the minimum size they need to fit their content. So we're not resizing the elements here, we're just aligning them inside their row. And by the way, they still stretch vertically to occupy the full height available for them inside their rows. All right. But in terms of the width, they just get centered and any remaining space stays empty. Now, if we get only one flex item inside a row, it's going to be placed in the center of that row like that. And we're going to have equal spaces on both sides of that flex item. Now let's try another value. So let's go for flex start to push the items to the left-hand side of the row. You can also try flex end to push them to the other side. And now you need to bear in mind here that this will change if the flex direction is set to row reverse. Basically, what's going to happen is that the order is going to change. So if I go for row reverse, then in the scenario where we choose flex end for justify content, Amazon will come first, and you'll see Apple right at the end. So what's happening here is that the flex direction is from right to left. So normally Apple will appear first on the right, and then the other flex items will follow on the left. But since we have set justify content to flex end, we pushed these flex items to the left hand side. All right, and to verify this, you can just change flex end to flex start, and you'll see that we start from that side because of row reverse, and we've got Apple first, then Amazon last, and then flex end will just push those items to the left. All right. All right, now let's try another value, which is space around. So this value will create spaces between our flex items. So let's go back to row for now. So we're going to have spaces between our flex items, and also we're going to have spaces on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side. And that's why it's actually space around. So we're going to have space around each flex item on the left and on the right. You can see that we've got equal spaces between the flex items, and the spaces that you get on the sides are actually going to be half that space that you get between two flex items. So if we reduce the width of the flex box or the container, then once we get one item, it's going to be centered in the middle like that. And if you carry on and we get two flex items, again, you get space between them, and you get half that space on the left hand side and on the right hand side. Now let's go to space between, which is slightly different. This one creates spaces between the flex items, but no space is going to be created on the edges. And the small space that you see there is just the minimal margin that we set at the beginning, just to be able to see the background behind our flex items. So if I reduce the width of the flex box, once I get one flex item, and now you can see the difference with space around, well, the flex item is going to be pushed to the left and the remaining space stays empty. And that's different when you go for space around, that item is going to be centered. All right. Now, if I reduce the width further, then once we get two flex items, then they are pushed to the sides and we've got space between them. All right. Now let's move to the column direction and see what happens. So in this case, we're going to be creating spaces between our items vertically. So we are actually aligning the flex items vertically inside their columns. So in the scenario of space between, we've got spaces between the items vertically. And you would need to note that the height of the flex items is going to be the minimal height necessary to fit their content, while they actually stretch horizontally to occupy the full width of the column. While if you go for the row direction, then the opposite happens. They actually stretch vertically to occupy the full available height, while in terms of the width, they only take as much width as needed to fit their inner content. All right. So let's go back to column. And by the way, the necessary height to fit Apple, the contents of Apple, for example, is the contents of the div plus any padding that we added to the div. Okay. So if I remove the padding, then this is going to be smaller. And we only need one column in this case instead of two. All right. So let's go for justify content set to center. And you can see that the elements are now centered vertically inside their corresponding columns. And you can see that we've got more space at the top and bottom when you look at the first column, and that's because Facebook is smaller in this column due to its small font size. And to make things clear, let's increase the height of the flexbox or the container to see how the flex items are centered inside the columns and how the free space is distributed. If you change the height to 400, then you're going to need only one column to fit the height of all flex items. So let's go back to 200 pixels, and we've got two columns in this case. Now you can play with the other values of justify content, like pushing the elements to the top of the column using flex start, or the end of the column using flex end. Let's increase the height to see this clearly. And you can create spaces between the flex items using space between, or spaces around and between using space around. All right, now hopefully you are comfortable aligning flex items inside their rows or columns. Now let's go back to the row direction and center the flex items inside their rows. Alright, now what if you want to align your flex items vertically inside their row? Well, this means that you may push them to the top of the row or to the bottom of the row or center them in the middle of the row vertically this time. Well, you managed to do that pretty well horizontally using the justify contents property by pushing them to the left, right, or centering them in the middle. Now let's see how to do that vertically. Well, the answer is pretty simple. You use another property called align items. So there are a few values you can use with align items, and each one is going to have a different effect on your flex items, but this time you're aligning your flex items vertically. So let's start with center. So you can see how we center them vertically this time. So the flex items here are centered inside their row. So the row is still there, and your flex items are centered vertically inside that row. And they only take as much height as they need to fit their content. And you can see that Facebook is smaller because of the font size of Facebook. Okay, let's try another value. So flex start is going to push them at the top of the row. And you'll see this effects in each row if you get multiple rows. All right. And to make this easy to understand, when you get two rows like this, just imagine that your flexbox or your container is divided to two boxes with equal heights, and each box or row has got its flex items inside pushed to the top like that. All right. Now, if you try flex end instead, then you're going to push them to the bottom. And if you try stretch, which is the default value, they will just stretch vertically, occupying the full height available for them inside the row. Now let's try another value, which is baseline, which will align the items vertically based on their first line. And you can see that Facebook is slightly down because the font size of Facebook is smaller than the others. So its baseline's location is slightly different from the other flex items. So to clarify this, let's add a new line inside Apple. So you can see that the alignment follows the first line all the time. All right. Now let's go to the default value, which is stretch. So now you must be comfortable aligning your flex items horizontally or vertically inside a row. If you change the direction of your flexbox to column, then align items is going to align your items horizontally this time instead of vertically. So stretching the items means that you are stretching them horizontally, not vertically. And that's the default behavior anyway. If you try center, then you're going to center them horizontally inside each column. So you've got two columns here, and you can imagine that the first column is right there, and you've just centered your items horizontally inside that column. Now the width of the flex items is going to be reduced to fit the content of each flex item. And you can see that Microsoft is bigger than Apple, and that's because its content is bigger than Apple. And you can try other values like flex start or flex end and see how you get different effects. All right, now let's go back to the row direction and the default align items value, which is stretch. Alright, now that you are comfortable aligning your flex items horizontally or vertically inside a row or column, you are ready to do something else, which is aligning the flex lines themselves inside the flex box. And that's slightly different from aligning the flex items inside the rows or columns. And that's something you're going to learn in the next video.